Before proceeding with the formal business of the meeting, I would ask Imam Qazi to lead us in prayer.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. I commence with the name of Allah, who is most kind and merciful forever. Say, O Allah, owner of the kingdom, you gave the kingdom to whom you wish, and you take the kingdom from whom you wish. And you bestow honor on whom you wish, and you dishonor and disgrace whom you wish. In your hand is all goodness, and you are powerful over all the things. You make the night into day and the day into night. You bring the living out of the dead, and you bring the dead out of the living. And it is you who gives without measure to whom you wish. On behalf of Muslim community and Jamia Islamia Gausia, I thank you all and pray for everyone.
Please be seated. Good evening, all, and welcome to the meeting. Before we begin this meeting, I would ask that members sit in their allocated seat, wear a face covering unless at all time exempt, and when not speaking, if you're not already scanned the NH COVID app at the entrance to the chamber, silence their mobile phones, stand up when proposing or seconding the item. Switch microphone on to speak and off immediately afterwards. If there is an emergency, turn left out of the chamber, follow the green emergency exit sign to the Man Town Hall entrance and assemble in St. George's School. This meeting is being live streamed to the public. Any member of the public present are entitled to take photograph, film, audio recorded, and report in all public meetings in accordance with the Open of the Local Government Bodies Regulation 2014. People may not, however, act in any way considered to be disruptive and may ask to leave. The first item of the business is to receive the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January 2022, set is out on pages 1 to 5. Does the council approve the minute and agree to me signing them as a correct record? Apologies for absence.
Mr. Mayor, I've received apologies from councillors J.I. Hussain, councillor Lovell and councillor Simmons.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Alan Skeppelhorn, Terry Keynes and Amjad Ali. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I include Saima Hussain and Kashif Hussain as well, please?
Nothing more. Mayor's announcement. Can I just first of all ask and remind members again that there is 19th of March is Mayor's charity dinner at Auction House. I would ask members, as well as I asked the corporate director, chief executive, and chief executive has already bought the ticket, so he does take the credit. And one of the other corporate director has offered a brilliant auction for the charity do. I would encourage other directors and service directors, because that was a norm when I got in this council, for every senior officer to buy a ticket at least and contribute towards the charities of the mayor. And I asked the members, and particularly the ex-mayors, for 22 years, I've attended all their charity dues, or at least contributed. I'll expect them to do the same, because I think we all need to support the good charities of the town and give a good example to the other people in the town. Thank you. Members, please note that the voting will be accepted by the exception. Rather than calling out each member's name to record their vote, I'll ask members to indicate if they wish to vote against the motion. If no member votes against, I will declare the item carried. The outcome will not be recorded in the minutes unless 6 members of the council indicate that they wish for this to happen, in accordance with the Standing Order 20.2. I would remind members that I'm holding a spring event, which I've already done at the auction house. And tickets are £45 or at £350 for table of 8. I would appreciate again if members can do, buy a ticket or at least make a contribution. I now invite Councillor Golding on behalf of the Executive Leader and Councillor Aslam Khan, the Deputy Executive Leader, to present an update on the progress of 2040. Can I just ask you that if we can do the presentation and also the question and answers 30 minutes, 20 minutes for the presentation and 10 minutes for the questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm here today on behalf of Hazel, who many of you know is not able to be here because of medical reasons this evening. And what she's asked me to do is to read out, apologies I've got to read out the speech that she would have made. So that's what I'll do. So Luton is a proud, determined town, more than capable of standing up to whatever situation or circumstances that it finds itself in. And as leader of the council, I've seen not just the council, but the people of this great town rise above countless difficult situations and come back stronger and better. Today's budget challenges come against the background of a decade or more of austerity, in which decreases in government funding has cut our own funding by over £100 million. Well, we could have resigned ourselves to this and left our fortunes to fate, but instead we took our destiny in our hands by launching the hugely successful Luton Investment Framework. That initial bold strategy soon began to pay off as huge investments started to stream into the town. Everywhere we looked, there were signs of regeneration, new jobs, higher wages, and a decrease in the number of people whose lives were blighted by poverty. And as we began a new year in 2020, the seeds of a brighter future for the town were well and truly sown. And then COVID struck. As a town, we have experienced so much misery and hardship. Like many places, we have suffered countless deaths and personal tragedies that continue to leave aching hearts in our families and in our communities. Workers have lost their jobs, and our school children have had their education disrupted. The economic impact has been particularly acute. We have, of course, experienced the nearly overwhelming effect of the pandemic upon our airport. And with air travel almost at a standstill, one of the most important income streams for our town, council, and for our valuable community organisations, dried up overnight. We were left with no choice but to set an emergency budget and make heart-wrenching cuts to services. These financial strains exposed inequalities and knocked residents back towards hand-to-mouth living. Life became tough. But we're tough too in Luton. Against the dark realities of the pandemic, we were able to see not only a light at the end of the tunnel, but the beginnings of a roadmap that will give us all hope for the future. And that vision was Luton 2040, no one in poverty. This was a goal around which we could all unite. Council staff, residents, businesses, schools, faith and community groups across the town soon realised that everyone has a role to play in this. Through dynamic engagement and consultation, we have been able to expand our shared mission of eradicating poverty to include specific objectives. The town's goal is to be a healthy, fair, child-friendly and carbon-neutral town, where everyone can thrive and no one has to live in poverty. 2040 is a long way off, and many people might believe it's too far away to make a difference to people's lives today. But in reaching our overall strategy, we've been careful to not only include milestones along that journey, but to rigorously and continuously assess whether we have met them. This approach has already given rise to notable achievements that are already making a difference to people's lives. If eradicating poverty is at the heart of Luton 2040, then the launch of Big Change Luton fundraising and education campaign with a partnership of over 20 other organisations has already begun to help those experience homelessness build a life away from the street. More than £1,700 was raised through donations. No one slept rough over Christmas, and residents learned how to alert the relevant teams where they observed concerning situations. Hundreds of people have signed up for our Passport to Employment programme, equipping them with the necessary skills for the world of work. We have worked with our voluntary sector partners to roll out vouchers to low-income households so no children went hungry during school holidays. We have achieved joint buy-in and agreement to a new, exciting town centre master plan that will involve mass regeneration, job creation, investment and a cleaner, greener area. To improve people's long-term health, we launched a smoke-free town centre partnership with local businesses to support people to help them give up smoking and stop visitors to the town being exposed to secondhand smoke. As a means of increasing community involvement and civic pride, we launched 10 Minutes of Community, which were encouraging citizens to dedicate just 10 minutes to help improve their neighbourhoods. This has given rise to some amazing community tidy-ups, which have left our streets better looking, fostered spirit within communities, and brought about much needed increase in morale. And I'll just put a little plug in here that we've got one on the 5th of March in Farley. Please come along 10:30 in the morning. In order to further bring communities together, we began the Luton Fairness Task Force, which is aimed at helping us all better accept and understand challenges and develop solutions to tackle inequality. In addition to these, we have been successful in continuing to draw outside money into our town. And I'm now going to leave my colleague and our Deputy Leader, Aslam Khan, to continue the story.
Thank you, Sean. And as Sean has said, not only have we worked hard mobilizing passion and drive we have come to know and expect from Luton Zone, but we have turned our attention to attracting funds and grants from outside to help us achieve our goals. Our 2040 narrative has chimed well with the government's levelling up agenda and been the basis for multiple bids, which have resulted in us being able to secure a number of fundings. And these include a £20 million from government's levelling up fund to help us build our extensive plans for our town centre regeneration, a 7.7 million to decarbonise or reducing the energy demand on public buildings, a £600,000 from reopening high streets and welcome back fund to revitalise our streets and support our vital, fantastic local businesses, a £500,000 from National Leisure Recovery Fund to support the reopening of leisure centres with all positive knock-on effects towards health and well-being, a £360,000 for a new youth hub to support job seekers, a £300,000 to deliver English for speakers of other languages courses in the town, underlying our reputation as a town that welcomes and supports those from other countries who come to us, and often after great sacrifice and difficulty. In addition, we have launched a new public sector shared buy local, an approach to procurement which has helped us to double our spend on local goods, services, and keep Luton Pound in Luton. And finally, and most importantly, we have established a new long-term partnership with the airport operators to pay the living wage, create more jobs for local people, and accelerate our net zero ambitions. All this has been accomplished in the past 12 to 15 months. All has been achieved against the backdrop of one of the most challenging experiences those of us living in Luton have ever experienced. Progress has been swift and far-reaching and made us realize that if we can achieve so much in such a short space of time when faced with such adversity, the future indeed is bright. But we know we have a lot more to do, and as a council, we are determined to bring the same level of dedication, energy, and enthusiasm that has already helped us to achieve so much. In the coming months, we plan to launch a good business charter, a new employment and skills strategy, both of which will help to build a more inclusive economy for all in Luton. Further develop and refine our plans to become carbon neutral and a child-friendly town. In March, we have exciting plans to unveil our river, the poignant project to commemorate those who lost to COVID-19 and to remember with gratitude the role of our key workers during the pandemic. The progression of Luton Dart, which will be a key driver in reducing car journeys to and from the airport, that will officially open this year. We will continue the next steps in the transformation of our town centre, which will open up of the River Lee and start our £20 million levelling up project, The Stage. We will also see the return of more large-scale public events across the town, following on from the success of vegan and Chinese festivals, as well as seeing once again community favorites such as the one-day carnival and the Mela. All all that is for the future, but tonight we're here to propose a budget for today. And thanks to our decisive action in 2020, we are on a much more stable footing than we were 2 years ago. Tonight you will hear a budget that no longer concentrates our minds on difficult decisions and cuts and tightening of our belts, but allows us to begin to invest in those areas the people of Luton have told us that matter to them the most. Tonight's budget is one not shackled by the past, but the one which looks to the future, to a town that, as Sean said, already is healthy, fair, child-friendly, and carbon neutral. A place where everyone can thrive and no one lives in poverty. We will now share with you a video clip which will give you further insights of the projects that Council, along with the partners, are delivering that will ensure that everyone can thrive and no one lives in poverty. Thank you. Share with you a video clip which will give you further insight.
It has been 1 year since we launched our Luton 2040 strategy
Council,
to make sure Luton is a healthy,
that will
fair
ensure
and sustainable
that everyone
town
can
where everyone can thrive.
and no one lives in poverty.
In the last 12 months, we've seen a lot of important developments in our
a
town.
video clip
Here are just a few.
will give you
We've
further
established
insight.
1 year since we launched 2040 strategy
Council,
to
along
make
with
sure
the
Luton
partners,
is
are
a healthy,
delivering that will
fair
ensure
and sustainable
that everyone
home
can
where
thrive
everyone can
and no one lives in
And
poverty.
in the last 12 months, we've seen a lot of
Share with you
important developments in our
a
town.
video clip
Here are just a few.
give you
We've
further
established 1 year
insight.
since we launched 2040 strategy
Council,
to
along
make
with
sure
the
Luton
partners,
is
are
a
delivering
healthy,
that will
fair
ensure
and sustainable
that everyone
home
can
where
thrive
everyone can
and no one lives in
And in
poverty.
the last 12 months, we've seen a lot of
Share with you
developments in
a
our town.
video clip
Here are just a
give
few.
you
We've
further
established 1
insight.
year since we launched 2040 strategy
Council,
to
along
make
with
sure
the
Luton
partners,
is
are
a
delivering
healthy,
that will
fair
ensure
and
that
sustainable
everyone
home
can thrive and no one lives in
And in
poverty.
the last 12 months, we've
Point
seen
of
a lot
order, Chair.
A video
Mr.
clip
Mayor,
give
point
you
of order.
since we launched 2040 strategy
Yes, Councillor.
that will ensure that everyone
At the same time, this is totally not coherent. We can't hear who's saying what.
I said was that I think he trying to stop the whole thing and restart it. I don't think any of us understood what was going on. So we will have to be patient. So technology doesn't always work right. So can we make a restart, please?
It has been 1 year since we launched our Luton 2040 strategy to make sure Luton is a healthy, fair and sustainable town where everyone can thrive. In the last 12 months, we've seen a lot of important developments in our town. Here are just a few. The refurbishment of the Hat Works by Cultural Trust and Lucy Pool by Active Luton. The completion of homes at Sundon Park and Solway Road by Foxhall Homes. The opening of Puttridge High School's new £23 million building, as well as Windmill Hill School, the new Sen School in York Street. We have secured £375,000 of Reopening High Streets and Welcome Back Fund to help our town centre to bounce back after the pandemic. as well as taking the first steps to transform our local economy with the launch of our new town centre master plan and securing £20 million worth of funding to level up our town centre. The plans for Power Court to become a new home for the Hatters. We have also secured funding to set up a new town centre board to strengthen our collective approach to community safety. We are supporting the growth of our emerging creative sectors after the launch of our new 10-year heritage strategy and 10-year arts strategy. We are working together to improve skills and employment for our residents. In the last 12 months, we have secured £360,000 for a youth hub. We have enrolled 600 people in our Passport to Employment programme, and we have secured £74,000 worth of funding for our Passport to Health and Social Care scheme. We have launched Luton's first social work academy. We have also continued to support families and vulnerable residents through the integrated family partnership service, as well as using the COVID winter grant scheme to provide supermarket vouchers to prevent children from getting hungry during the holidays. And we are continuing to work together to tackle the climate emergency by obtaining £7.7 million to decarbonise our public buildings and retaining green flag status for 6 of our parks for yet another year.
The progress of the last 12 months demonstrates that we're already on course to achieve our bold and exciting vision for Luton 2040. Making this vision a reality, though, is only possible with the input of partners from across the town, including our brilliant, innovative businesses, our dedicated public sector organisations, and our inspirational voluntary and community sector. This is why we've taken a system-wide approach, working closely with partners through our 2 boards to deliver on the strategies for Luton 2040. We're also giving partners the opportunity to sign up to our Luton 2040 pledge, giving partners the chance to set their own commitments to delivering our vision for our town.
Bedfordshire and Luton Community Foundation are a funder that is working across the county and is committed to eradicating poverty. What we see across the county, and especially in Luton, is a great deal of inequality, poverty, and a lack of support and access. And we want to play our part in committing to addressing this inequality. We pledge to address inequality through the funding that we offer and the decision-making that goes into making the fund decisions. Luton 2040 is important for the town, and we encourage everyone to get on board.
We're delighted to be making this pledge to show our commitment to Luton 2040. For us, it's about improving the health, the well-being and life chances of all of Luton's community, whether that's through growing our own workforce, supporting the most disadvantaged children, or creating opportunities for everyone to become active. We're committed to the goal of Luton being a place to thrive.
Everyone at Barnfield College supports the Luton 2040 vision, and we are really excited to be part of it. Here at Barnfield College, we will deliver education and training in priority skills, ensuring people are equipped for the modern, sustainable economy and to drive growth. We'll continue to provide study programmes that develop a full range of personal, social and employability skills and remove barriers to raise aspirations, ensuring education and lifelong learning is accessible for all. There's so much to look forward to across the town, including our brand new campus at the New Bedford Road, which is opening in the spring. And this investment is developing a real community asset with state-of-the-art facilities that will prepare local people for the jobs of the future.
Over the next 12 months, we will be seeing even more progress on our journey of Luton 2040 vision of eradicating poverty, with more of our partners signing to the pledge of Luton 2040 and delivering further transformation for our town. This will include the launch of Good Business Charter and new employment and skills strategy that will help us develop more inclusive economy for all in Luton. Further developments of our plan of becoming a carbon neutral and child-friendly town. The creation of Fairness Task Force will help us to tackle the inequalities in Luton. The unveiling of our river to commemorate those lost to COVID-19 and the role of our key workers during the pandemic. The progression of Luton Dart to be open by 2022. The next steps in transformation of our town centre, including opening up the River Lee and the start of levelling up project of £20 million, the state. And we will also see return of our large-scale public events across the town. We have already achieved so much in a space of a year, and by working together, we can build back better and deliver on our shared vision in making Luton a place where everyone can thrive.
It has been 1 year since we launched our Luton 2040.
Well, thank you, members, for your patience as well. Are there any questions on the presentation? Or a comment? Yes, Councillor. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Khan. Can you assure us, like our residents, because of this program, they can get good chances, and after this training, they can get good high-profile jobs as well?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Naveed. You have seen that we have 5 major projects, including Century Park, including Bartlett Square, which will generate around 9,000 jobs, and with Morton House, around 2,000 jobs. And Morton House is designed to support our residents to get the necessary skills to get those vital jobs. And with our skills and employment strategy, this is by far the largest and most extensive piece of work the council has ever taken. And the whole point of that is to understand our landscape, to understand the needs of our local residents, to ensure that we have a collaborative approach from early years all the way to university, including our employers, everyone coming together and making sure we have the quality of education offer and the skills necessary to take those jobs that we are creating. This is only some of the projects that I'm talking about when we're talking about our visionary master town centre plan that will further create opportunities, as well as the airport. And with green jobs in our digital agenda, will create many, many more opportunities. But let me assure you that we are absolutely determined that we support our residents to get those decent jobs.
And then Councillor Abbas was then?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I did have a question, but you went on to comments, so I'll do both of them together. The question for Councillor Khan or Sean is, will you be looking to invest in neighbourhood services during this vision of 2040? Then I'll come into comments.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure Andy will go into that later. After a decade of austerity and cuts, which were imposed by Tory government, we, with our sustainability program, which has been praised by the LGA before COVID, and after COVID, we of course were impacted and the hardest. And even with the recent audit governance committee, it shows us that we've got robust plans in place, and we are now in a position to reinvest in services that our residents have told us that they want the most, and that includes more cleaner and greener space, streets and parks. So you will see now, much more improvement and visible improvements in our town centre.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. On to the comments now. So watching that video and listening to Sean and Councillor Khan here tonight, as a member, all of us members should be proud to what we have, this council has achieved through Luton 2040 so far. with the leadership of Lord Robin and Hazel. We have listened to residents to invest in our key areas, and we've done that. I mean, the video is a typical example there. 2040, in one of your speeches, you said it seems far away, but working with officers and the VCS groups, to me, 2040 does not seem like a long time away. You know what I mean? But the vision for a child-friendly town, yeah, seems to be near, to be honest with you, because our officers, our partners, our community are working with us on this project. And that is good. And you should all be proud of what we have achieved here tonight. Going on to Andy later on, in a little while, you know, we were here not long ago with a massive budget cut, you know, which has been like daunted, and we thought we were going to be in a hole. But we've survived that, we come through that, and that is because we all were united as a group, and we stuck by of what we achieved. Thank you.
Malik.
Yeah. Shall I respond to this?
Can let because we only got 4 minutes left.
Thank you.
Try to get as many comments as I can, and then you can answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was great to see the presentation there and our partners working together in the vision that we have for 2040. Maybe I won't be around to see some of that, but maybe our children will be able to flourish from that. And I think the inequalities that we've seen, whether it's been health or whether it's been opportunities, is really good to see that we will now be able to get some of those opportunities for all communities to be able to thrive in a town locally. So thank you for that, and look forward to all the work that we'll be doing.
Councillor Burnett.
Thank you. I just wanted to delve a question with regards to the aspiration is digital, and I would like, if possible, for those responsible to say with the creative industries, what more is going to be there, because it was very high level. And in the last 24 hours, Luton has been associated and linked quite rightly as Jamal Edwards was born in Luton, and he used digital technology in such a massive way to change his life. And he gave back to so many young people, but it was digital and the use of YouTube, not the old technology, but current technology, relevant for those children that have been born in the millennium, that he has benefited from and transformed people's life, like was said today again and again in the news. So I would like the two relevant portfolio holders to tell us how we're going to build on the gift that Luton keeps showing again and again and again in the arts to use with our young people to move this town forward. Because today was fully demonstrated what Jamal did to transfer his life and others. He used technology relevant for the 21st century. Thank you. I look forward to my colleague's response.
Any other member before I ask Councillor Khan to respond? Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bennett. That was you're absolutely right what you said about Jamal Edwards, and our thoughts are with all of his family and friends. And he did. He created a whole industry and improved his own life and that of others. But he also gave back to the town. So in Luton, we're really good at encouraging entrepreneurs, and we're just about to get even better at it. So you'll know that in the Hat District, we now have several buildings like Hat Works and Hat House that are there specifically to encourage those from the creative industry. Come along, they can start off very, very cheaply in these buildings and start their own creative industry and become the next Jamal Edwards or somebody else. And this is the kind of thing that we're doing in the town centre at the moment. I know that Marie Kerbishaw from the Cultural Trust will be inviting many of your members to come along to an event later next month that celebrates the 14th anniversary, 14th birthday of the Cultural Trust in Luton. And we will be hoping that many of you will come along there and you'll hear a lot more about the stuff that's going on. I won't say any more because I know the Mayor has given us 1 minute warning. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Khan, can you
just
respond in a brief one,
yeah,
please,
just to
because we have got a budget.
Yeah, sure. Just to further assure you that that's one of the areas that the university and the colleges will be investing to supporting, that we support entrepreneurs who want to embark on digital career. So, you know, we have made sure that offer is there. And just to return back to what Abbas has said about us being in a stronger position to invest, and I want to give credit to our officers from 4,000 to 2,700. We're delivering more services than ever before for less money and less people, and that credit goes to our members as well as the staff for delivering such a fantastic job. Thank you.
Right. I'll ask you, Chief Executive, please.
Mr. Mayor, all members of the council have been circulated with a list of items before the council this evening, which fall within the ambit of section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Any member affected should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on any question relating to those items. Mr. Mayor, I have received no section 106 disclosures, and I've also received no disclosures of interest.
Thank you. Right. The name the council is voting on the budget decision must be, by law, be recorded in the minutes of this meeting. This will apply to the next item on the agenda, item 5.1. The Chief Executive will call out each member's name in turn. Please respond for or against or abstain so that your vote could be recorded. I now invite Councillor Malcolm to move agenda item 5.1. Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I start, I would draw members' attention to the sheet that was on your table. There's just a revision to the table at page 7 that you've got in front of you. The wrong one was accidentally included in the report. So tonight, we agree our annual budget. We have a legal obligation to agree a balanced budget the upcoming year each February. And indeed, as we now know, an obligation to act within the year if we come to believe that our published budget is no longer achievable due to our circumstances. And it's because of these legal obligations, combined first with central government austerity and latterly with the financial consequences of a global pandemic, these obligations have meant that we've had to make many hard and unenviable decisions. Some of those decisions still sit uneasily with me and with us all, I'm sure. We have no choice but to present a balanced budget, but that hasn't meant that we've simply rolled over. No, while at the same time as facing up to really difficult decisions about public services for our town, public services we ourselves, all of us in this room, rely on, we've also been determined to make the most of what we have. Growing a housing company from scratch to a healthy company with a number of delivered sites and more in the programme, and overseeing significant developments at our airport. As has already been mentioned, we were gaining real traction before the pandemic upended pretty much everything all anyone knew for the last 2 years, reaping so much destruction and causing so much loss. Our strategy for growth and investment was hit hard, and in particular, our airport. But we collectively understood the importance of our airport to our town, collectively understood that standing by our airport during a global pandemic was the right thing to do. And last October, we agreed a stabilisation package for our airport company to see it through these difficult times. And I hope the spirit of acting together, not without critique, but of acting together, importantly, I hope that spirit will resonate forwards in the new shareholder group which will be the council's eyes and ears when it comes to our various companies. So tonight, to this budget. The last 2 years have caused significant disruption and pain, but perhaps even more so than 2 years ago, when I felt we were gaining real traction in the investment in and development of our town. Perhaps even more so than then, I feel like tonight is a different kind of budget, a different circumstance that I'm talking about. And while we can't know what the future will bring, I am hopeful that this is a turning point, because this is a budget that invests in services. It invests in cleaning our streets and repairing our roads, improving our playgrounds and strengthening our enforcement. These are things that we have long awaited. These are things we've long desired to do, yet circumstance has constrained us. That is why tonight it is such a relief to present a budget which moves us closer, not all the way, but closer to our ambitions for public services in our town. For too long, public services have been in retreat. But tonight, with this budget, my hope is that we have turned a page. And while it will certainly not be plain sailing, and there are savings or indeed income which will need to be found and delivered to balance future years' budgets, this budget is different from those of the last 10 years. So, Mr. Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to move this budget, this investment in services in our town. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded and reserve the right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I now propose to take questions on the report. Before taking the question, I would advise that under the standing order, members may ask only one question plus the supplementaries. However, the discretion to allow members to ask, In accordance with the budget protocol, I'm going to allow the first member of each of Liberal Democrat and the Conservative group to indicate that they wish to ask the question, to ask to an unlimited number of questions and supplementaries for the mover and within the total time of 20 minutes. The normal rules will apply to all other members. Are there any questions to the report? Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one or two questions. I doubt very much whether I'm going to take up the whole 20 minutes, but there you go. That partly depends, of course, on the length of the answers, doesn't it? Can we start with Ernst & Young, the council's auditors, who have recommended the council should not borrow any further money for airport expansion schemes until legal and commercial due diligence supports the scheme's feasibility, viability and financing. So is the councillor concerned that the council's auditors are making such a recommendation? And what provision for compliance does his budget make, please?
Thank you for that question. It's a really important area, the work of our auditors and their contribution to the governance of our council and of all the assets of that the council owns and holds and runs on behalf of people of the town is really important. I'm not concerned by that recommendation from the auditor because, from my perspective, they're pretty much agreeing with and recommending the practice that we already take with regards to any big decision, any big commitment. For example, with the DART programme, we ran a special task and finish group within the council where there was training and advice from external experts outside of the council, 2 members sitting in that context to become fully aware of the decisions that were being made and the financial and legal ramifications of those so as to make that decision appropriately. So essentially it's a process that we would already follow whenever making any such decision. It was the process that we followed essentially when we had to work out what to do with the consequences of a global pandemic on an airport that we own and are responsible for looking after for the people of this town, but also future generations, which is highly important given our ambitions for Luton to be somewhere where people aren't stuck in poverty by 2040. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sort of, thank you. And it's very interesting. I wonder if he'd explain, please, why the capital programme in the Green Book on page 29 indicates that he's planning to loan the airport a further 8.3 million in the year for which he's now presenting this budget, page 29, and 1.8 million in the year 23-24.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So those will be schemes that have already been assessed and judged to be acceptable, and the financial and legal consequences of those will have been considered fully and properly, and the schemes will have been agreed that they can proceed, but spending doesn't immediately happen as soon as the scheme's agreed. So it will just be the full spending of those programmes being run through. It was something I was going to point out actually when it comes to the Treasury Management report later on. There's a real tail off in any spending that we're expecting in terms of our external companies. This coming financial year is actually the last year that we're expecting much to go in that direction. There is some increases in future years, but there's really real tailing off because the programmes and the projects are being delivered, and there aren't any imminent plans for further investment. Of course, that could come in time, but that would need to be judged to be the right thing to do by all those making that decision to invest in, whether it be the airport or something else, another project, because the airport isn't just the airport company runs, Morton House that's already been mentioned tonight, and a number of other assets are potentially there to be invested in and developed out if there is a robust and appropriate business case there to be made, which could lead to further investment in, Vauxhall Homes or the airport company, or perhaps something else if that is the right thing to do. But at the moment, there aren't any plans along those lines, so that's why it really tails off. But the spending over the next couple of years, it's very much projects that have already been agreed and assessed, and the actual spending happening, because that doesn't happen immediately when a project has been agreed.
Just one more on the audit relationship, and then we'll move on to more specifics. The audit has also suggested that the council should undertake financial stress testing to ensure the council has the ability to service its debt and to continue statutory services. Given that the medium-term financial plan shows the council's total debt going up to almost £970 million, has this testing been done, please? Who did the testing? And where were the results reported back in the democratic process?
I think I might need to rely on Deb for some of the detail of that, because there's quite a lot of detail there in terms of who actually did any stress testing and things like that. It's a part of the process of setting the budget. I know when that recommendation was being made from our auditors, I spoke to Deb about our Chief Financial Officer, for anyone who's not aware, about that process of making sure that what we're doing is going to be able to weather any tests that may come. I suppose I would point out that a global pandemic, we've got through that, actually, like we really have got through a global pandemic and had to make some very challenging decisions to get through that. But if that's not biggest stress test possible, I don't know what else could be. But that doesn't mean that more could not happen, and that is what that stress testing is, of course, about. I feel like there was another part of that question. If there was something I've missed, please just come back to me.
Okay, let's move on. Look at some of the specifics. The budget report to the executive on the 9th of February in the capital programme mentioned starting to spend on the Butterfield Green Park and Ride scheme. The bus companies are talking about cuts of up to 1/3 in their local services. I just wonder if he expects them to finance the extra services from the Park and Ride, or whether he's planning to subsidise them.
It's a real shame, isn't it, that the bus companies aren't able to keep those services going. Unfortunately, we can try and influence, but it would mean, as you say, subsidising services if we were to try and keep those going. We will, of course, keep conversations open with the bus companies to try and encourage them to keep as many services running as possible. I think there is a fundamental difference that is similar probably to the busway, which has actually been really successful over recent years, because it's a specific route and it's a specific corridor with a lot of people travelling on it. It's more financially viable to run a service there, and there are very frequent services along the busway. And actually, when you have a Park and Ride, it's a different model of service. Essentially, it's a very different model of service. So I'm not anticipating that.
Okay, I'd assume that means he doesn't really know the answer to that one. Where are we going next? Oh yes, in spite of the stated intention in the local plan to protect parks and green open spaces, Finance Review Group were told recently of intentions to build on Littlefield Green. Yet there's no mention in the capital programme in the Green Book at all of this plan to concrete over Littlefield Green. Is that because he's proposing to sell this green open space to a developer?
It is not, because it's an HRA scheme, so you might want to ask my colleague later, and I'm sure he'll be able to tell you a bit more.
Well, of course, I'm not allowed to ask questions of Councillor Shaw during this budget debate.
Okay, Councillor Shaw.
So I guess we need to move on. Where are we? Ah, yes. On this evening's agenda papers, on page 9, paragraph 10, talks about the SIPFA report into the council's finances. The SIPFA report agrees with the point often raised by Liberal Democrat councillors that using contingencies to balance the budget is a smoke and mirrors exercise designed to hide the real overspend figures, and the council should stop doing it. Why did it take a strong recommendation from the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy for him to agree to stop using this accountancy trick?
I think I would defer to our Chief Financial Officer. It was the way our Chief Financial Officer wanted to account for this. I think, in my honest opinion, and I'm not a finance person, so I mean, I am our finance person, but I'm not trained as a finance person. I'm not a specialist in finance. But in my honest opinion, it's a different way of doing the same thing, really. Like it's a way of saying, well, we're not going to deliver all of this in this year. We'll deliver some of it next year and some of it the year after. And that's what a contingency essentially says. And what we've done is stopped using contingency because it's a recommendation that was made, and we're happy to follow that recommendation. And hopefully it will make a difference. I'm really hopeful that it will, because, you know, delivering the savings that we've got within this budget and that need to be delivered mean that we don't have to make other difficult decisions about other areas of service that the council provides. So it's really important that we do deliver those savings. So I'm hopeful that treating the accounting slightly differently, I'd be very pleased if it makes a massive difference. I'm not totally expectant. I think there are probably other things that need to be in place, like the scrutiny I asked FRG to undertake with a bit more detail, going through some of the savings that are in the budget and need to be delivered over future years. I think that's the kind of thing that probably makes more of a difference than whether you treat something as a contingency or say you're going to deliver a small amount of it this year and more of it next year, which is what we've now moved to doing. I'm happy to move to the latter, given the recommendation.
The one difference it will make, of course, Mr. Mayor, is that overspends, if there are any, will be more obvious and more easily identifiable than under the disguise system that's been used in the past. I see that you're planning budgeting for a 2.25% staff pay increase. We had a rather interesting conversation about this at the Fire Authority, where it was ultimately decided that in fact 2.5 or 3% was probably not a very sensible figure to put in the budget when inflation is currently running at 5.5%. Does he still think that 2.25% is a sensible figure?
I think, given it's an unknown, it's better to put that figure in and deal with it once it's agreed. I think it's a moving feast at the moment. The budget planning process has been over a number of months. We have to decide what level to set it at, and I think it's a reasonable place to set it. I honestly think it's a reasonable place to set it, and we'll see where final agreements end up and whether we have to deal with any additional spend that is required if it is a high percentage. But you know, it will be down to negotiations as to where that final percentage ends up.
Another overspend coming up by the looks of it then. Well, where are we going next? Yes. He's talking about saving £100,000 by closing Leagrave House and transferring staff to Arndale House. Excuse me. Would he explain how moving staff from buildings the council owns to buildings the council rents can possibly be a saving of money?
Because the Leagrave Centre, that's the right building, isn't it, will be mothballed. So we won't have the day-to-day spending on it in terms of energy and other associated costs, and then in time we'll work out what is the best thing to do with that property. But that's the answer. It will move from being mothballed to using some of the space that is available in Arndale House for those staff.
Okay, we might as well wind this up. We're not making too much progress, are we? In a little while, he or his colleagues will probably be criticising us if we do not put forward an amendment to his budget. The figures for the council tax on page 127 of the executive report. Yeah, which figures would you like us to amend? How about amending the figures for the council tax on page 127 of the executive report? Or how about the figures on page 7 of the papers for the meeting this evening, published a week or so ago? Or the figures he didn't bother to tell us about until we arrived in the room for this evening's meeting? Which figures, if he can't make his mind up what council tax he wants to charge people, which figures would he like us to try to amend, please?
I think it would be up to you to decide what an alternative budget might look like, to be honest. It was a bit lame and cynical, some of your questions and comments at the end of your questions tonight and response to my responses. A little disappointing. It's up to you. If you want to present an alternative to what we're saying is going to be our plans for the council's budget and where we're going to invest, where we're going to try and realise savings, because there are still savings that need to be made to be able to balance budgets over future years, and we have a legal requirement to balance our budget. If you think there's a better way of doing it, please tell us. That is all we ever say. That's all the comment is. If you think there's a better way of doing this, and pointing out the places where there are figures in the budget in relation to council tax, etc., and the fact that there was a slight error in some of the detail, isn't really anything to do with presenting an alternative. Presenting an alternative is about doing some work and thinking about what your policy aspirations might be, where you might seek to make some savings so that you could invest in something additional. I think the reality is you haven't wanted to do that 10 years because there's been no wiggle room. It has been circumstance, as I set out, that has put us in a position where we've had to roll back public services here and there and make savings year after year after year. So of course you haven't wanted to present an alternative because there hasn't been an alternative. We're in a position now where we're actually investing some money. So I wondered whether you might choose to say that you would invest it slightly differently. I don't know. But it would be very much up to you to do a bit of work, think about what your policy aspirations might be for our town, for public services in our town, where you might seek to invest more, and maybe reduce elsewhere so as to be able to achieve that. But yeah, it's up to you whether you do that or not.
I don't consider that to be an answer to the question at all. He knows perfectly well that under the Local Government Act, we're not allowed to put forward an alternative budget. The budget has to be a recommendation from the executive. How, please, could he possibly expect any opposition to propose an amendment to a budget when the actual figures for council tax are concealed until we arrive in the room for this evening's meeting? How can I put forward an amendment to a budget when I don't know what the budget is actually proposing to charge people for council tax?
How misleading. The council tax figures were concealed until no, the council tax table that sets out what different banded properties was an error pulled over from last year unintentionally and picked up and addressed in the meeting. The actual figures have been on point all the way through. So it's not that anything has been concealed. And I remember our previous Conservative leader making suggestions as to what he might want to propose to our officers. And it was a few years ago now, but our officers, our finance team went through a lot of work to make sure that what he wanted to propose, whether it would be financially viable or not. There is scope to have officer time and work if you want to propose something different. I think you're using a get-out clause to try and wriggle out of having to put any work in to actually contributing to what a budget might look like, or suggesting what an alternative or what alternative ideas you might put on the table to be able to focus on some of the things that you think are important for our town. So I think it is an answer. You might not like it, but it is an answer to your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Your time is up now. 20 minutes. Yeah. Councillor Young, would you want to ask anything? Any questions? Do you want to ask any questions from? Does any other member wish to ask questions? Question, is it? Yeah, of course. I'll come to you.
Can the portfolio holder for finance tell us how much pressure has been put on him by the Liberal group? Because in Billy's Weekly Liar, or the Focus as it's known as, they actually said they were putting pressure on you, they put pressure on you to spend more money on street cleaning. Could you tell us how much you've spent extra on street cleaning, and how much did this great pressure put on you by the Liberal groups in Billy's Weekly Liar, did that affect you in any way? That's the first question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I've experienced precisely no pressure put on individually by any of our colleagues opposite. I'm very, very pleased to say that it's not as far as we would want to go, of course, because we're still constrained by circumstance, but we are putting £1 million into street services, and I think it will make not all the difference we would want to make to the look and feel of our town, but I think it will make a noticeable difference to what it is like to be someone who lives in Luton, someone who cares about Luton, and someone who wants the best for our town.
Right, Councillor, so the next one would have to be a supplementary question.
Supplementary, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you.
On your finance sellers, first of all, a bit of advice of the officers, because I think David Franks was misleading the council. The way I understood it, the opposition can make an amendment as long as it's been passed through the Section 151 officer to show that it's a robust amendment and that amendment.
On a
can go
point
to
of
the full
order,
council.
Mr Mayor, I believe the member is entitled to ask one question. This is certainly not a supplementary to his
All right,
first
it's
question.
supplementary to the general fund, what's in the paperwork in front of us. So supplementary to the general fund is...
Mr Mayor, it is not a
We're not going to have
supplementary
a
question.
debate among the two of you. Can we just stick
Yeah,
to
I'll
the
ask my question then,
supplementary
Mr Mayor.
questions?
One of the things what the council has done all the way through the report, it mentions private sector housing and how the overspend in private sector housing had a bigger is having a
Mr
bigger
Mayor,
effect
this is
on our
not
budget.
a supplementary question.
It's a supplementary question to what's in the general fund. And it's in the general fund. That's what I'm asking questions on.
Supplementary only. Can we just have supplementary council? You should know, you have been ex-mayor.
Exactly.
You know what supplementary questions.
It's on the general fund. It's a
Mr Mayor,
supplementary
it needs
question.
to be a supplementary question on his original question.
I'll
Okay, thank you. Right, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we all be clear that all these questions from the Liberal Democrats about figures is just a distraction, that the austerity that we face in this town started under the Lib Dem and the Conservatives, the bedfellows. So please, can you confirm that we used to have income from government about 120 million. It's now being cut, deep cut to 11 million. And this is as a result of the Lib Dems and the Conservative conniving to make sure that our town shouldn't strive. But due to your prudent handling of the income that we have, that's why we are where we are, that the council is able to invest now and not be under deep cuts as expected. Thank you.
Mr. Malcolm?
Yeah. Very much agree that we were put in an absolute financial hole by the Tories in combination with the Lib Dems, and I'm sure our Lib Dem colleagues wanted to disassociate from their Lib Dem colleagues in Parliament as that happened, but we were put in an absolute hole financially by the Tories and the Lib Dems when they were in Parliament. The amount of money that was taken away from public services, not just in our local authority, but across the whole country, the council-run public services, which is basically all the stuff that everyone relies on, with poorer areas, more deprived areas being hit harder. It left the country in an absolute state. That reduction of funding and that lack of support we have seen. Yeah, very much agree with what you said. I'm very proud that we've worked hard and we've got ourselves to a position where we can finally start to invest a bit again in services that we all rely on, that we all care deeply about.
No, not now. Thank you. You could have asked at that point, but not this say. Councillor Wynne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can you stand up, please?
Sorry. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder please explain how this can be a balanced budget when we see savings which were supposed to have already been made being carried forward? Questions about the level of financing cost going forward, going up on the loans that we take out. It doesn't seem to me at face value that with the savings issues which haven't been achieved and the very high risk of much increased financing costs, it doesn't seem to me that I can be happy that this is a balanced budget.
Thank you for that question. I'll try and take the second part first and then return to the first part. So in terms of financing and taking out loans, actually a lot of those have now been secured at very, very low rates of interest, and that is now set. You borrow from the Public Works Loans Board at whatever the rate is on that day at the time that you borrow. Probably for a lot of the money that we've borrowed over the last 6 or so months, I think, is when we've been kind of putting that in place. We've probably been borrowing about 2.5%. It will be 2.5% for the period of time that we borrowed for, and I think we're generally borrowing for like 20, 30, 40, 50 years, something like that. So that is not like interest rates going up. It's something to keep our eye on. It's something that's highly relevant to the Treasury management and investment strategy that is before us later tonight as well. But because a lot of that borrowing has now been baked in and actually undertaken formally with Public Works Loans Board, it's set at the rate that it was borrowed at. In terms of this being a balanced budget, I think we are making progress in lots of areas that have been sticky for many years in terms of trying to deliver savings. And actually, it was something that I asked the Finance Review Group to continue to look at over future months and years, actually, to make sure that there is that scrutiny of here are the savings that we've agreed. Because the way I see it, we all care about Luton, we all want the best for our town. But actually, if we can together collectively make sure some more of these savings are delivered, all to the good, because then we don't have to make other difficult decisions elsewhere or reduce things that we really don't want to reduce. So I think there is work still to be done. I've seen the tracker that outlines the savings that we've got profiled. So some of it has been reprofiled, as you say. There's, I think it was paragraph maybe 20. Somewhere in the report it talks about it. So some of them have been reprofiled. I've seen the kind of red, amber, green status. So some things were red and we just were in a place where we were saying, actually, we're not going to be able to do this. So there's a few things that have been reversed and we've said, this isn't going to be possible. It's not going to be done. There's some things that are amber and there's some things that are green, as in like we're really confident that these are going to be delivered this year. So I think it's a much higher proportion that are green rather than amber for this financial year. And then next financial year, I think it's flipped slightly the other way around in terms of future savings potential. That's stuff we're not reliant upon to balance this year's budget. So for the stuff for this year's budget, there's a lot of stuff that's green that we're really confident that is actually going to be delivered now. It's working on it for a while, and sometimes things just take a while to lead in. There's some stuff that's amber, but my recollection of reading through that sheet today, like the items that are RAG rated as we're not in a green space, we don't think we're definitely going to do this, but we're on the journey. There were some things that we're making good progress on, actually, and it sounds from the narrative that I was reading that we're moving towards delivering those. But as I say, collective endeavour, let's get FRG on the case as well. And I think hopefully together we can make sure these savings are delivered, which means we avoid making difficult decisions and like reducing things that we wouldn't want to reduce, and maybe put ourselves in a place where we can invest further in things that we do all honestly care about and want to see more of in our town.
Supplementary, please, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, can you stand up, please?
Yeah, keep forgetting that. Just as a supplementary to that, I understand that we've got things going from red through towards green. Understand that. However, it still leaves us in a position where there is a huge backlog of savings, which we've still got to face this year, and it doesn't make me feel very happy about the budget.
Thank you. I'll take your point. I would say over the last few years, we have delivered £30 million out of the £38 million of savings that we set out. So we have made really good progress. We've delivered a lot. It's been a huge saving programme and an unexpected saving programme. When I presented the budget 2 years ago, at the start of 2020, we were not anticipating having to deliver that in-year budget to take significant amounts more out of our overall budget. So 30 out of 38 million has been achieved. There's been some reprofiling. A few things we've said, actually, this is red, we're not going to be able to do it. And we've reversed them within the budget. But that's all taken into account in terms of a balanced budget. I think the only other thing I'd point you to is within the report tonight, there's our Chief Financial Officer's assessment of, I can't remember what it's called, but it's assessment of the adequacy of reserves and the ability of the balancing of the budget, basically. Like it's a 10-page document. I'd encourage you to read it, because that is our Chief Financial Officer's opinion of actually what we set out here. It's achievable, or it's robust, and the reserves are sufficient if there are unknowns that come to emerge over the course of the next financial year.
The final one, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I did indeed read that report, as you won't be surprised to know. And even having read that report, I'm still concerned about the very high risk associated with those items.
You're welcome to your opinion. It doesn't quite tally with the Chief Financial Officer's opinion in terms of the budget. I think, we've been in a hole. We were put in a massive hole, and then we had faced a lot of that down, and then we got hit by COVID, which has had massive financial consequences. And we've worked our way through that. And actually, quite a bit of that has been done together in terms of working out where we go and how we achieve that and what the steps forward are. I think, we're in a decent place. I honestly think we're in a decent place, and yeah, there are more savings that still need to be delivered, but I would call on members of FRG to play a part in that process. But actually, there's a good story to tell of having delivered, 160 million pounds of savings over the last 10 years. That's a huge amount of savings delivered over the last 10 years, and actually over the last 3, I think it is, years, 30 out of the 38 million pounds of savings that have been profiled. There's still some to deliver, but a lot of it has been achieved. And as I say, there's a much higher proportion that are kind of rag rated green for this financial year, and some that are rag rated amber still, but then stuff that we're not even relying on in this year's budget for next year's finances in terms of some of the savings. There's still fair watch that are green, and then some that are amber. So I think we're in all right place. I think it's going to be okay.
Councillor Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question.
Yeah, can you stand up, please?
My question has actually already been covered by my colleague in his supplementary questions.
Okay. Thank you. All right. If there are no further questions, then are there any amendments? Yeah. Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I was sitting here and listening, it was a bit rich to hear those comments and questions from Liberals when they got into the bed with their best buddies and imposed the most vicious cuts on us, and then sit there and ask us how you're going to do it. You've been asking that question for 11 years. You've seen us make 160 million pounds of those savings, and we've done it each year and year when you doubted us. If you were serious, if you cared about our residents, and he's right, you would have put a proposal. You can, and don't mislead people, your residents and us. You can make amendments. You can present an alternative budget, but you choose not to because that takes thinking, that takes work, that takes ability. We've shown that courage where other councils put up their hands, closed shop, handed in the keys, and the government took over. We didn't. Our officers didn't. We took up the challenge, and here we are today. We are reinvesting back in our services and giving back to our residents what they care about the most. So please, if you really are serious, then let's see some work from you. Thank you.
Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, I thought there were a couple of people in between Councillor Aslam and me, but never mind. Here we go. It really is a bit rich, isn't it, for Councillor Aslam to accuse me of misleading people when he stands there and says we are allowed to present an alternative budget. The law specifically says that we can't do that. There's no implication or suggestion or anything else. The law says the budget must come as a recommendation from the executive. Yes, we can try and amend it, but we cannot present an alternative. Now, I'd just like briefly to summarise why I'm going to be asking my Liberal Democrat colleagues to vote against this budget. Let's start with the income from the council's airport company, estimated in the next financial year to be £26 million. But apart from some rent, the rest of it is mainly interest on outstanding loans from the council. We do wonder how Luton residents will react when they find out that he has loaned the airport company some more millions, which they will then pay back to the council to cover these interest payments. Seems like a sort of odd way to go on to me. Borrowings predicted to reach 963 million by March 2025. That's almost twice the council's total annual expenditure. Is that a sensible way to run a local authority? And while we're talking about debt, let's have a look at the airport company again. Debenhams went broke last year, mainly because the company was carrying a debt to top line earnings ratio of 7 times. Yet he wants us to agree to Luton's biggest and most important asset, its airport company, carrying a debt burden 12 times its pre-shutdown top-line annual earnings. I just can't believe that he's really asking us to do that. It's struggling to get auditors to sign off accounts which should have been finalised almost 4 years ago. How many local authorities does he know that have 3 years worth of accounts that the auditors are refusing to sign off? I don't know of any. I don't know of any at all. The Green Book tells us he's identified 2.2 million of savings that he doesn't know how to achieve. As if he didn't already have more than enough unachieved savings on his books. Oh, incidentally, I note the plan to charge bus companies for using the busway seems to have mysteriously disappeared. Maybe he's finally come to realise that that's not going to work. He says that the business rate increases linked to the airport enterprise zone are important. Yeah, they would be if they were going to happen, but since there seems to be little prospect of a robust business case for the access road, we can't see how he's ever going to get any business rates out of the enterprise zone. We must be running out of time for that. I think we've probably already run out of time because the government rules around it were time limited. And finally, how do you deal with this? He can't make his mind up what the council tax should be. Every time we see a proposed figure for council tax, it has changed from the figure we were last given. If he has such difficulty making up his mind how much council tax he wants Luton residents to pay, and when he does make his mind up, he keeps that information to himself, and we wonder whether that's because he thinks he might change his mind yet again. How can we possibly have any confidence in his budget? I ask the Liberal Democrat members to vote against the budget.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on the motion? Councillor David Oakley, no?
Thank you. We've heard what the Lib Dems have said, but I think we need to hear what the Chief Financial Officer have said in their conclusion in terms of this budget. It's on page 146. Conclusion. Taking into account the above analysis, comments, and the level of contingency included as part of the budget, I am of the opinion that the estimate made for the purpose of the budget requirement put forward for approval as set out to report agenda item 5.1 are, I repeat, robust. It can be robust. This is coming from the financial officer. It says it's robust. So I don't know what you're talking about. And the level of the proposed financial reserves are adequate in the short term. Thank you, Chair.
If no other member wish to speak, then I'll call Councillor Shaw. The second of motion.
I'm confused, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
In second Andy's motion, The Liberals have finally done it to me. They made me, so my head don't know which way to turn. Let's have a look at the first thing. Just 10 minutes ago, it's not often David Franks does it, but tonight he's done a flip-flop in about 10 minutes. A few minutes ago, he couldn't amend the budget. He couldn't do anything with the budget. His statement you just made 2 minutes ago, he says, we can amend the budget. So which one is it, David? 10 minutes before that, you couldn't do anything. You can amend the budget. The 8 years we were in opposition in this council in the last 20 odd years, every single one of those years, when the Liberals and Tories did their little coalition to keep us out of power, we moved an alternative budget. That alternative budget had to go to the officers a few days before for them to check it, go through it, ask any questions to make sure it was robust. And that's what happened. You just said you can amend it. But this is what the Liberals are voting against tonight now. They're voting, even though the Focus said they're going to support it and they're going to put pressure on the council to do it, they're voting against an extra £1 million going into street cleansing and parks to do all the work they're telling them with Billy's Weekly Liar that they're actually going to do. But tonight in this council chamber, they're voting against it. The other thing they're voting against, all the way through the report, is all the work we're doing with private sector housing, with licensing, HMO registration and everything else. South has been told, South is getting all the licensing, it's getting all the HMO, getting the private sector licensing, it's paid for out of the general fund, which is this budget, just in case any of the Liberals get confused. What they're doing is voting against that tonight, but they've just put a leaflet out saying now they're going to put more pressure on the council to do more licensing round there. So what are they doing? They're telling the public one thing and coming here and doing exactly the opposite. You got out and tell the public how you voted against £1 million more going into the council's cleansing budget, because that's exactly what you're doing by not supporting this budget. With that, Mr. Mayor, I hope we support Andy's budget. It's a very good budget, but the Liberals have just shown what they are. They couldn't care less. They'll tell the public one thing and come in here and vote a different way. Otherwise, move an amendment to keep that £1 million for cleansing in the budget, because that's what you've told people you'll do in Billy's Weekly Liar. So do it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The motion is before the council. Members be asked to cast their vote individually to be recorded in the minutes. Oh, sorry, Andy, I'm speeding things up. I didn't let you speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe I get a brief opportunity to respond. I think Tom has said a lot of it already, but I'd be feeling a little uncomfortable if I was a Lib Dem, because I'm about to vote for £1 million not to go into cleaning our streets. I'm not quite sure what your leader is asking you to do, but I would probably be feeling a little bit uncomfortable about that if I was in your position. It probably doesn't matter too much, because I'm not sure how much of what goes into focus leaflets is that true. So you might not get pulled up on the fact that you're voting against a budget that puts £1 million into cleaning our streets and invests in improving playgrounds across our town and things like that. But there we go. I think it's important to recognise that you really can produce an amendment. If you wish to produce an amendment, it can be assessed as to whether it's viable or not by our Chief Financial Officer, and then you can move it, should you wish to do so. I think you did recognise that, even if you were trying to make a point that the actual budget itself has to be recommended by the exec. You talked about dividends, which was a bit of a throwback to last year. The value of the airport is about 3 times the amount of the outstanding loans. I thought we had kind of collectively come through the financial challenges placed upon us by the global pandemic and found a way through supporting what is a very, very important asset for our town and for those who live here. And I'd hoped there was perhaps a new spirit emerging. Perhaps it still will, but it feels a bit like trying to perhaps be a little hyperbolic with one's language around what some of the issues are. There are some savings outlined that are not yet at delivery stage. It doesn't mean they're not achievable. We think that they are achievable. It's just that they're not yet being used to balance the budget. It's good financial management to set out, here are some of the things that we think we might do in future years to be able to deliver some more savings to address the budget gap that emerges year after year after year because inflation happens year after year after year. And that has an impact on the overall amount of money that we have. You mentioned the auditors. There are other councils. There are other councils in the same position. You're also there in the joint finance review group and audit and governance meeting where they said, actually, once we've bottomed out these issues that we're really close to bottoming out, next year's accounts and the years after from the year that they're looking at should be able to be signed pretty quickly. So I think you're kind of misrepresenting a little bit what's going on there. And finally, the figure on council tax has not changed. Page 7, the recommendation at paragraph 5 clearly states that Band D is £1,662.17. That figure has not changed in the budget papers. All that was tabled tonight was an amended table to outline how that breaks down and varies for different banded properties, because we talk about Band D equivalent properties because that's a common language that's used across all local authorities in terms of what council tax looks like. That figure has remained the same as what and was set in the budget right from the start. There was a table brought forward from last year's budget papers by mistake, which sets out what a Band A property pays, what a Band B property pays, what a Band C property pays, all the way up to Band H, and that is what's been amended because it was there in error. But the actual figure for council tax has remained the same all the way through, as you probably very well know. So yeah, Lib Dems vote against investing £1 million in cleaning our streets. Good luck with that.
Thank you. Now, now I think the motion is before the council member be asked to ask their vote individually to be recorded in the minutes. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Abid. For. Councillor Driss.
For.
Councillor Akbali. For. Councillor Ahmed. For. Councillor Akbar. For. Councillor Ali. Councillor Begum.
For.
Councillor Bridgen.
Against.
Councillor Burnett.
For.
Councillor D. Chapman. Councillor P. Chapman. Councillor Donnellan. Councillor Franks.
Against.
Councillor Godding.
For.
Councillor A. Hussain. For. Councillor J. Hussain.
For.
Councillor M. Hussain.
For.
Councillor Javid.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Kursid.
For.
Councillor Malik. Wrong. Councillor Malcolm.
For.
Councillor K. Malik.
For.
Councillor T. Malik. For. Councillor Masood.
For.
Councillor Mead.
Against.
Councillor Moles.
Against.
Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Nichols.
For.
Councillor Pedersen. Councillor Petts. Councillor Roche.
For.
Councillor Salim. S. Salim.
For.
Councillor T. Salim.
For.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Underwood. Councillor Waheed.
For.
Councillor Wynne.
Against.
Councillor Young.
Motion is carried. I now invite Councillor Shaw to move the agenda item 5.2. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In moving the item, there's a couple of things I need to say. Number one is on item 8, the officer's recommendation. They thought we should follow the government's recommendation on rent rises. The government recommendation was just too much. We don't need to put it up 4.1%, and that's what the government says we should. I don't know what it's going to be next year because it's based on inflation rate in September. And if inflation rate's 7% in September, you could be looking at a 9-10% rise next year. That's if we decided to follow the government's recommendations. There's nothing within the rules to say we've got to do so. What we have put in here is what we promised last year yet again. There's 3.7 total amount, 3.762 for insulation, more cladding, more solar panels, gas, new gas boilers. We promised we'd do it last year and we've kept that promise this year. The total amount, I believe now, is 2750 without the ground source heat, what will go on the new build and everything else. So it takes it well over £3.5 million being invested. We need to do that. I wish tonight we could do a zero rent increase. I honestly do. We've got tenants now what are suffering more than I've ever seen before in my life. I had one on Saturday at my surgery. What hadn't had a heating or electricity on since the Wednesday before because she'd been sanctioned for 2 weeks by Universal Credit. Us as a council had done, as far as I was concerned, a very strong rent demand on rent arrears she got because of the sanction on Universal Credit. So instead of spending over a year to repay back, we said, no, we want it back now. So she couldn't afford a heating or electricity. And from April, that's going to get even worse. So what I've asked the officers for is that we have a re-look at the way we collect rent arrears. You'll see from the report, it's gone up over £400,000 this year, during the lockdown alone. But what we can't do is push people into poverty by not doing the energy conservation work, the work what will make it cheaper for them to live in them properties. We've got to do that. That's the only reason I'm moving 2.5. Otherwise, I'd have still been here arguing with the officers now for a zero rent increase. But that wouldn't allow us to do the work to make their lives better. And that's what we've got to do. Housing has been promised a new white paper for the last 3 years. We're still waiting. We've done the stuff what's in there for tenants. We've done the stuff what's in there for fire safety. But we don't know what's going to come out of that white paper. No one does. If anyone knows anything, let me know straight away. So our recommendation is 2.5, 50p on the garage rents. It's all laid out for you. An increase of 2.5 across everywhere. The only place there won't be an increase is the service charges for private tenants who have lots of flats, who their service charge will go up £17 a year. The simple reason for that is, but legally, we have got to collect the money we spend on those services. And that's what it is. There is an house building programme there. David's likely to ask about Littlefield. Littlefield is in the programme for future years. It's not Littlefield Green. It's a piece of land up Littlefield. Because David knows if we decided to come forward with Littlefield Green, then we would have to find alternative open space up there. And at the moment, because that's what our planning colleagues say we've got to do, and at the moment, we can't find that alternative open space. And that's what we'll do if we come forward with it. So you've got your house building programme. More important, I think, at the moment, is you've got your insulation programme. Millions going to be spent in Park Town, despite the fact that the focus has just gone out. We've already made those decisions. The high-rise are already being cladded down there. And that's £6.5 million alone. So we're getting on with it. We're doing it. We only need 2.5. We don't need what the government recommendation was of 4.1. 2.5 gives us all the money we need. And even Dev has said it's a robust budget, which he didn't say a few weeks ago, but now he's saying it's a robust budget, so I'm happy proposing it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions? Yes.
Could Councillor Shaw please define exactly what little piece of land
at Littlefield Road it is then, if it's not the green.
Can you stand up and put your mic on, please? Thank you.
I will get you a complete outline of the area sent to you through the post or by email, whichever one you want.
Well, can you do that?
Yeah, no problem at all.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak on the motion? Councillor Franks?
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, to say that I'm intending to ask my Liberal Democrat colleagues to vote in favour of this.
Thank you. Anybody else? The motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. That concludes the business of, sorry? Sorry?
Go back to page.
Oh my God, goodness me. Hang on, I was speeding up, the chief executive is putting me right. I thought we can escape. He's taking the page out somewhere. All right, thank you. I now invite Councillor Malcolm to move the agenda item 5.3.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is important that we agree our Treasury Management Annual Investment Strategy for the next financial year. It's a legal requirement, in fact, so get to it. So this paper is about our investments and borrowings approach and the prudent management of these for the upcoming financial year and indeed the future. It should be read in conjunction with the capital programme, which is in the Green Book, which was referred to earlier. Some of you might have a paper copy, some of you might have an electronic copy of it, as part of the budget, and indeed the annual investment strategy, which is Appendix Q of the budget report. Just a few things that I point to in moving the recommendations as set out in the report. Paragraph 29. You might be interested to read. It sets out that there are a few really quite significant capital schemes that are in our capital programme in the Green Book, but are not yet being hit in terms, not yet hitting the financing strategy in terms of capital financing requirement, because those schemes will need to be viable in and of their own rights. They're big, exciting, important schemes for our town, but they're not yet showing in the capital financing requirement, because they will need to make their own ends meet. They will need to be undertaken in line with robust business cases, which show that actually they're viable in their own right without the council borrowing to subsidise the development of those schemes. Similarly, the tables at paragraph 31 and 33 show that the investment in our wholly owned companies is going to fall off, going to tail off because projects are being delivered in the coming financial year. As I've already said, I've already talked about projects that have been agreed, have been spent on, and actually that spend is still happening because you don't deliver something all in one go. It happens over a number of years, and that's kind of tailing out over the course of this year. Paragraph 48 sets out the really very significant positive impact that our ownership of and investment in our wholly owned companies has on council taxpayers in our town. Indeed, there will be a gap of £605.91 per Bandy equivalent property, which would need to be closed in some form or other in the upcoming financial year, for the upcoming financial year, if we didn't have finance that we get, the income that we get from our wholly owned companies and our other investments. And finally, the only other thing I would point out in the report is at paragraph 38, which is actually quite an important thing for us all to be aware of in relation to our investments and borrowing approach and the prudent management of these things, because actually there is quite a potentially consequential risk that may materialise over the course of the upcoming financial year, because the government is consulting upon some changes to the rules around MRP, which is minimum revenue provision, which is where you have to make a contribution each financial year to essentially depreciation. So the depreciating value of an asset, you make a straight line calculation, maybe over 50 years or 40 years, to say actually this thing was worth £20 million that we borrowed to buy it in the first place. We're going to pay off £1 million a year over 20 years so that we paid off the capital as well as the interest. It's essentially that, but the government is consulting on perhaps changing some of the ways in which MRP affects councils. So we're obviously entirely working in line with current regulations, but if regulations change, some of our borrowings will be out of line with those recommendations. And actually they're saying that anything that then you have borrowed need to be covered by MRP. That's what the regulations currently set out. So it's a real quite material risk that we could face over the coming financial year. It's important that actually, we're all responsible for these things that are set out in this report. If it does come to pass, hopefully we've made significant representations to the government, and I'm sure other councils there would be a number of other councils quite significantly affected by this as well. So we've all made representations to the government about the significant impact and significant harm this would cause. So we'll see where things end up, but it would be inappropriate of me not to flag that to other members as we agree this report tonight. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll move the recommendations as set out at paragraph 2.
Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions? Councillor Franks?
Only one, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councillor Malcolm made reference to the government proposal to change the minimum revenue provision regulations. This could have a really serious effect on the council's revenue budget. My understanding from an executive report on the 9th of February is that the consultation on this expires at the early part of February. 8th, I believe, was the date. I can't remember for sure now. I wonder if you could tell us who actually compiled the council's response, assuming it went in time, and whereabouts in the democratic process it was approved.
It was compiled by our Section 151 officer and did go in time, and that was the process. It was a technical consultation, so right for our technical officers to respond to that.
It's supplementary, Mr. Mayor. My understanding from standing orders is that responding to consultations is an executive function.
I will need to be advised on the nature of what you're saying out there. So I'll get you a written response if that's what you would wish, or someone can advise us in due course.
You're going to give a written response.
A written response will do quite nicely, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. A written response will do quite nicely. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Does any member wish to? Oh, sorry, David. I've forgotten you.
Mr. Mayor, I think you're trying to squeeze me out a bit. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the Treasury confirm that the Financial Review Group were consulted on 1st of February 2022 and no concerns or issues were raised, and the official opposition sat in there when this went to them when they were consulted? Thank you.
Indeed. Nice. Agree with that.
Right, any other member? And the questions I might have missed somebody, but hopefully not. Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we heard earlier Lib Dems trying to put muddy waters to our very positive story that we've had with borrowing and investing to grow and creating opportunities to make a better future for our residents in Luton. Luton Airport back in 2012 was only delivering £9 million. And today, before COVID, It was delivering £27 million, created thousands of jobs, and it's the only community's airport that gives back to the community and gives back to its residents of £7 million of support that makes a massive difference in people's lives. We borrowed at a very low interest rate, made use of the potential of investing and getting a return of our investment. I hear of no other project in the country which can give you this level of return. It is a positive story. Our auditors overall were very convinced and satisfied with our plans. So please don't just look for opportunities and look for opportunities to create headlines. Give us credit when it's due, because these members here have worked tirelessly over 11 years to make this council a sustainable council. We almost faced bankruptcy when a huge chunk of £160 million out of our treasury. What do you expect? Were there others who were not brave enough and they closed shop and went away? We didn't. We stayed open. We cared for our residents, and we are delivering and will deliver a better future for our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Franks.
How fascinating, Mr. Mayor, that Councillor Khan now tells us the auditors were quite satisfied with the level of debt the council is building up and with all the other issues. Isn't it odd then that they've refused to sign off the accounts? Weird that, isn't it? They're very happy with what they're doing, but refusing to sign off the accounts. Yeah, very, very odd. Largely because we really are very seriously concerned with the level of debt the Labour Council is building up. I am asking the Liberal Democrat group to vote against this. Thank you.
Make a point. There's no need for Liberal Democrats praising the Labour Council. Councillor Khan can manage that quite well himself.
Anybody else? Any other member? But do you want to speak, Councillor Bridgen? Or are you just getting excited? All right. Okay, thank you. We can. All right. Motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the motion? As the proposal is, members have already indicated they want to wish to vote against the motion. Sorry?
Second to Mr.
Oh, second to Tom.
It will take a long time, Mr. Mayor, but a lot of you turn to page 170, item 53. The council is currently maintaining an under-borrowed position, no matter what David Frank says. This means the capital borrowing the capital finance requirement has not been fully funded with loan debt, as cash supporting the council's reserves, balances and cash flow is being used as a temporary measure. This strategy is prudent, as investment returns are low and counterparty risk is still an issue. This needs to be considered. So even our section 151 officer is turning around and saying what we're doing is prudent and good accounting. The only person that disagrees with it, and it'd be the rest of the Liberals, is David Franks. He knows better than our section 151 officer. I know which I'm going to trust with our accounts, and I don't think it's David, put it that way. It's not often I trust an officer, but I'll trust Dev on this one.
Right, Councillor Malcolm. Councillor Malcolm, did you want to finally?
I don't feel there's need to say very much, but I think it is important to point out that the auditor's concerns are reflected across many other councils, because it's the pandemic what has got in the way of the ability to sign off accounts, and there are a number of other councils in the same position that we're in with unsigned accounts. I think if you remember and think back to the meeting, the joint meeting between FRG and Audit and Governance Committee, it was not the overall level of borrowing that they were saying was an issue. I'll leave it there.
Okay, I think I've followed that. Right. Right. As member of it, as intended that they vote in against it, so will be asked to cast their vote individually. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Abid. For. Councillor Driss.
For.
Councillor Akbali.
For.
Councillor Ahmed. For. Councillor Akbar. For. Councillor Ali. Councillor Begum.
For.
Councillor Bridgen.
Against?
Councillor D. Chapman. Councillor P. Chapman. Councillor Donnellan.
For.
Councillor Franks.
Against?
Councillor Godding.
Sorry, Chief Executive, it's Godin, not
Goding.
Godin, and for.
Councillor A. Hussein. Councillor J. Hussein.
For.
Councillor M. Hussein.
For.
Councillor Javid.
For.
Councillor Khan. Councillor Kursid.
For.
Councillor Malcolm.
For.
Councillor K. Malik.
For.
Councillor T. Malik.
For.
Councillor Masood.
For.
Councillor Mead.
Against?
Councillor Moles.
Against.
Councillor Moore.
Against?
Councillor Nichols.
For.
Councillor Pedersen.
Against?
We're giving him time to sit down. Councillor Petts, please shout. Your button.
They don't know.
For clarity, that was Councillor Petts. Against, Councillor Roche. For, Councillor S. Salim.
For.
Councillor T. Salim.
For.
Councillor Shaw. Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Underwood. Councillor Wahid. Councillor Wynne.
Against?
Councillor Young. Carried.
Motion is carried. This is the end. Right, it's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your patience and